Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of It's Simple, Really. This week, we're going to be exploring a topic that's actually quite interesting for both Vadim and I. We both had kind of long corporate careers splattered in between, long stints of being employed with various attempts of being self-employed. And so today we're going to explore, what does it mean to have a job? So Vadim, I'll throw it over to you. What does it mean?
Yeah, you know what? I had this thought for a long time about what does it mean to have a job? Sure, the simplistic answer is a job is when you're employed by a company that rewards you by means of a salary for your knowledge, expertise, or it's just simply doing the things that the company asks you to do. That's kind of the simplistic way. And in most cases, the reason this topic came up, in most cases, this is the only way that people see it. In fact, here's my story. I was applying for, I think it was a loan or a credit card, one of those things. And one of the questions when you go to fill out your information is, well, are you employed? So for this year, Greg and I, and I'll just speak for myself. So I was self-employed this year. So the question is, are you employed? Sure, yes, I am trying to make money. Do I have a consistent paycheck? If that was the question, no, I do not. But am I employed? Yes. And so I answered yes to that question. And then the person who was kind of with me on the other end of the line asked me, so who do you work for? I said, well, I work for Solo Business, which is part of Business Vector Limited, which is my company. Registered everything. Oh, great. And can you send me your pay stubs? No, I can't. And there was a pause. So it's like, but you said you were employed. I said, yeah, this is my company. Oh, so you're self-employed. Sure. Okay. What's the difference? Well, that's not the same. And this creates a chasm. So on the one hand side, you can be creating value, doing something positive for society, delivering something new, or just trying to make ends meet. But that's not employment in the eyes of the grand society. In the eyes of the financial system, it is not employment. Employment is only when you guaranteed a paycheck. And that is when Greg and I started talking about this interesting dichotomy, I would say. So is self-employment really being employed, or is it not? So being an entrepreneur, you would always I would take a stance as like, yeah, of course it's being employed. I have to no, I don't have to, but I sit at my desk and I try to create many things. And those people who followed us, Greg and I, on entrepreneur versus entrepreneur, know that for the last year we have tried and built and delivered so many different ways of potentially earning income. Were they successful? Sure they were. To a degree, that's a different question. But in the eyes of society, we were unemployed. We did not have a paycheck. So it seems odd that the definition of what does it mean to have a job really depends on if you're working for a big company with a stable paycheck. Which means that everyone who is essentially, let's think about this, a real estate agent, general contractor, so anyone who's working for themselves do not have a job. Seems kind of odd. And I want to really challenge that notion because, sure, financial institutions want to see that you can pay off whatever debt you incur with them. And that requires a stable paycheck. But what's to say, like, remember companies like Enron? For those who were not around, Enron was a massive corporation that crashed and burned in what? In a day? Think of Merrill Lynch. That was a massive organization, also disappeared. So there's inherent risks. But to say that a person doesn't have a job just because they don't work for a big corporation seems a bit strange. But being strange or not, it doesn't change the fact that you will, if you are an entrepreneur, you will have to face the realities that for a lot of things that you want to do, let's say you want to get a mortgage and then you're in North America, you're SOL, which means you're not really in luck with that regard because you don't have a job. But then there's another side to this whole thing about having a job is how you feel about yourself. There's this emotional component that people say, oh yeah, I have a job. And when they say I have a job, they put so much gravitas into that statement. It's, I have benefits, I have an office to go to. Well, at least people had an office to go to. You might have employees or people reporting it to you. You may be making decisions worth multiple millions of dollars. That means having a job. So in other words, having a job for some people outside, forget like everything I said in the beginning about the financial impact and the way like financial system sees you. For a lot of people, having a job actually defines their personality, defines who they are. And this, and I can attest to that when I first lost the job, is exactly what people stress over about, is they kind of lose themselves. You don't have a job. What exactly are you? Yeah. And I'm gonna pause right now because I know Greg's very polite, but he's itching to just throw one in there.
Two things I want to jump in on. One is your story, the financial checking box on an application made me laugh because I remember in 2007, I left an 11-year career at a company, and I had a company car for the last, 4 or 5 years that I worked there. Mm-hmm. And of course, I'm about to leave, and I'm like, oh shit, I need a car, so I had to go lease a car. And on their application, it says, "Are you employed?" I'm like, "Yep." "How long have you been with the company?" 11 years. There's no box for, "Are you going to be there next week?" So, I had pay stubs, I had everything. So I got the lease and got a new car, and, whatever, a week or 2 weeks later, I was unemployed / self-employed. Right. So it's funny how that whole process is all, backwards looking. Yeah. To validate your worth, which it kind of ties into the last thing you were just saying is, and this is what I went through recently when I left my last job, was there is a tendency to tie your identity and your self-worth to your job, particularly the things that you get fulfillment from in that job. Like in my job, I had people reporting into me. I led a big team. I was working on, important stuff and contributing to the company. And all of a sudden you leave and it's like, there's nobody coming to you for advice or for answers or your expertise. Yep. There's nobody inviting you to meetings for your expert opinion. There's no financial results that you're looking at that tie directly back to what you've been working on or anything. And it creates this huge hole. It's funny because the coaching session I had on my course, that's what we talked about, and having the realization that, and it reminded me of some lyrics of a song that I like, by Rain Maida, who's the lead singer of Our Lady Peace. But it's the lyric is, "We're not our problems, our age, or our paychecks." And, quite often we think we're our paychecks, especially I remember the first time I started making over $100,000 a year, I thought I was the king of the world, right? Like you invest so much time and effort to getting the next salary bump and the next salary bump, and you hit a milestone like that, and you think that, that defines you. I'm in the 6-figure club kind of mentality. And when I look back now, not to say that you shouldn't be proud of those achievements and things, but it's not who you are. It doesn't define your worth. Am I any less of a person now than I was when I had a job? I don't think. In fact, I think it's the opposite. I think I've grown and been through so many more challenges, and you learn who you really are when you're out on your own.
Well, I want to echo that, because it's one of the things that entrepreneurs do really well, unlike the people who have never had to experience the entrepreneurial spirit, is you have to solve a lot more challenges. And it's a shame that the corporate world doesn't really. I mean, sorry, I'm not gonna compare it to the corporate world, because the corporate world looks, when people are being hired, you're being what the corporate machine looks for is a cog that should neatly fit into a specific part of the machine.
Mm-hmm.
But being an entrepreneur, you are the machine.
Yeah.
So you know how all of those cogs are connected. For anyone looking for a better metaphor, please, by all means, let us know. Maybe there's a better analogy. But technically, you know how the machine functions, all the way from janitorial duties to finance to accounting to making those executive decisions. And this is a problem, because when an entrepreneur comes to a place of employment and they ask him, "Can you do this?" And sure, unless it's a terribly technical thing that you need special training for. My example would be, like, I was always around data, but I never had a stats or math degree. If you ask me to write a model, that's beyond my reach. And I have no inclination to go out and spend a couple of years learning how to do that in order to be able to say, yes, I can do that. But technically, you can. And this is the thing about entrepreneurs, is entrepreneurs approach everything from a standpoint is, do I have the mental fortitude to figure this out? Yeah, I do. So do you know how to do this right now? No, but I will in a month, maybe in 2 months, but I will. And there's nothing that can stop me. But that's not the case for a lot of stuff. But so if we go back to what you were talking about, the loss of self-identity is, it's terrible that we tie ourselves to a job and what it means to have a job, that status, that I mean, there's a lot of organizations that are very much still hierarchical, and your title means so much.
Yeah.
It means inherent respect, counsel that people will seek from you, approvals that you can provide. It builds up your ego to an nth degree. And there's always usually a paycheck that comes along with it, which also reinforces your worth. And I'm using air quotes there because that worth is there today, but it can be taken away at any point in time, because despite you being an executive, you're still a cog in a machine, which can be taken out and swapped for a new one. And that's the one thing that it's not bad. It's not good. It's actually doesn't have any qualities attached to it. It's neutral. The way it is.
Yeah.
So back to where we started from. If I were to provide a bit of my summary, so what does it mean to have a job? I do believe that what it means to have a job is doing something meaningful for yourself. Even if you are gainfully employed and you're getting that paycheck, the question that everyone should be asking is, what is it in this for me? Because that decision, that presentation that you're working on right now, that's not for you. I mean, in fact, you do that presentation, you deliver that presentation, in a week's time, maybe even in a day's time, you're not going to remember what it was all about. The significance of that little thing that stressed you out and you had to work on for so many days is going to be gone. Now, if you learn something, that's valuable. That's for you. If you mastered the art of negotiation, of being able to convince people to follow you into the fire, that's for you. But few people think about that. People think it in the presentation type stuff, and yet I have to conclude that even though I believe I'm right, and I would imagine, Greg, you would agree with me, even though I believe I'm right, recall for society as a whole, when they ask you if you have a job, and if you don't have a stable paycheck coming into your bank account every 2 weeks or so, it looks like it means you don't have a job.
Yeah. It's funny. I was coaching somebody who was a long part of their career was as a home daycare person.
Mm-hmm.
And they made comments a number of times about, like, it wasn't a real job or like something like that, because A, it's self-employed, and B, you're just looking after other people's kids. But
Right.
having put my own kids through home daycare, that's a real job. I mean, it requires a certain skill set, a certain personality, and it's also, hugely important work to rear and navigate. Like I think a lot of the success my kids have had was predicated off the fact that they had a really good home daycare person
Yeah.
for 4 or 5 years of their life. Um, so I know.
Actually, this is completely on a tangent to what does it mean to have a job. But you raise up a very good point. I feel very strong and passionate about some of those early years education and just even daycare, even like people who look after babies when moms have to go back to work.
Yeah.
It is such an underappreciated and undervalued work. In fact, that person's like, oh, I just ran a daycare, or a teacher's like, especially elementary teachers, they don't get the same respect as a CEO of a big corporation. And yet, if you think about it, those people have more impact on more human beings, and they set them on a course in their life
Yeah.
uh, that no executive is able to reproduce.
Yeah.
Like there's no company that's able. Oh, okay, sorry, social media companies aside, no company is able to impact the human development as much as those people. And yet, you're right, people like just like, oh yeah, it's daycare. That's
Yeah.
easy. Like if that's easy, kids come in and then they leave.
Yeah.
Man, anyway, but that's a tangent. But I hear you, and I think that's a great example of undervalued job.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think it all gets back to your point about the definition of what is a job, right? So it's
How would you define the job, Craig?
well, I think a job is when you're um, getting paid to do something. That's a job. Um, so it's and it doesn't have to be task oriented per se, which I think that's the paycheck for time continuum that most people are on. You're trading your time for money. Um, like as an entrepreneur, like you and I, the things we've been trying over the last year, like you know, we're looking to get paid for doing what we're doing, but it's like the paid comes after,
Yeah.
not before. Whereas, I know that it's a bit semantics when you're getting a paycheck that you work for your 2 weeks and you get paid for those 2 weeks, but really you're kind of locked in. Like you can mail it in one day or take a sick day or whatever, you still get paid. Like that's one of the big differences too. But yeah, I mean, and I get the whole thing we talked about with the financial industry, why they have, for them, they're mitigating risks, right?
Yeah, they are.
But it's funny, especially through the pandemic, the whole notion of there's been a lot of talk about the importance of small businesses and independent businesses, and that segment of the economy has taken the biggest kicking through the shutdowns and closures. Yet it's been touted highly as kind of the backbone of the economy.
Yeah.
But it's funny too, because it's also the segment I think that's the most resilient and will bounce back and will, not everything will come back, but people will come back maybe in different ways or forms or whatever. But that spirit that made those people successful in the first place can't be tamped down forever. Like those people will be back, and hopefully back to thriving and contributing to the economy and so on. So it's the balance has definitely been shifted in the favor of corporations in the last couple of years.
It's true. That's undeniably true.
Yeah.
So tell us what you think about what it means to have a job, and whether my little rant about the fact that paycheck determines if what you're doing is a job is true. Would be glad to hear from you, because it's simple, really.